Welcome in, everyone, to our In the Details podcast. I'm Julie Boudwin, joined here by James Smith, publisher of TigerDetails. Jimmy, what a wild season it's been for LSU. 2020 has been, the highs and lows of this program. Started out as undefeated national champs with a season that no one is ever going to forget, and we're ending it with a disappointing 5-5 run. From your perspective on the outside looking in, can you talk about just the emotions of this season, whether it's from the team's perspective, fans' perspective, and maybe something that you're going to remember about this season for LSU?
Yeah, I think for a lot of LSU fans, middle-aged LSU fans and younger, this is the highs and lows of their football lives with LSU football. You know, you've had the national championship and then the COVID season and the poor product on the field, all in the same calendar year. And so, you know, I'm 40 years old, so I can go back and, you know, this is one of the worst years of LSU football of my time following the sport at that level, right? So, I mean, to put it in perspective, that can happen in an 11-month span, and then all of the young and the restless in between, right? Because it was a soap opera in between all of that.
Right.
And so, there's been books written. Every time there's a champion, there's a book written. There's books on Dabo Swinney, Nick Saban, Ed Orgeron, Bruce Feldman wrote a book on him, so on and so on. There needs to be a book on this LSU season here, you know, and really just not even just the season, the year. I mean, 2020 there's many books to be written about this year. LSU has its own. And so what a crazy ride it's been. And looking at it from the side of course, we're all surrounded by LSU fans, right? And so family members and hearing them melt down and the highs and lows, and then looking at it from the way we have to look at it as journalists, and to, you know, we've never seen anything or covered anything to this extreme, right? And so when you just put it all together, it's just what a year. Kind of ready to put it behind me for sure, as I'm sure everyone is.
Right. It's crazy to think about. I mean, when I think of the national championship from my perspective, I just remember, and I've told a few people this, I just remember the clock hitting zero and all of us, you know, as we do at the end, rushing the field, storming the field, trying to get the shot of, you know, everything. And just that's what I take away. Like, that's what I remember. Just the sea of people on that field, and just like literally shoulder to shoulder people, like, could not move to get in one direction to another. I have never experienced that post football game before, and I've covered Saints games even, and I had never experienced that before. So that's what I remember. And just to think that from that moment, and then like a short 2 months later, the entire world is like flipped upside down. Like, I don't think anyone ever saw that coming. Certainly not LSU fans when they're on that high from that 15-0 run to, you know, what we just finished seeing this season. It's just been an incredibly wild ride, and like you said, it's something that fans are never going to forget, you know, from the highs to earlier this year to the lows of this season. And speaking of lows of this season, obviously 5-5, we've mentioned it. Not what anyone expected, not what anyone thought. I certainly didn't think that. I thought they'd lose a couple of games, but I didn't think it would have been the product that we ended up seeing. But just from your perspective and your expertise, what are some positives that can give LSU fans some hope going into next year? I mean, we saw some plays. We saw the team kind of grit it out, stick together towards the end. But what would you say is a couple of positives from this season?
Yeah, I think there's really a lot of positives here. And I think going back to the beginning, we probably should have all been more grounded in our expectations, right? We just saw the most remarkable season we've all witnessed ever in college football. And so to go from that and expect a team to be 5-5 the next year, it's almost impossible for a human's mind to take that leap, right? And so none of us were prepared to do it. But looking back, perhaps we all should have. I mean, they lost a ton. And so, once the season, I kind of hit reset about midpoint in the season and said, okay, let's look at this from a different angle now, moving forward, how we should have approached the season coming in, with expectations as journalists and so on. And from there, it started looking different for me, right? Because it's all about the future at that point. And then you start noticing, man, this D-line could be really good next year, especially if Ali Gay returns, right? And BJ Ojolari stepping up as a freshman. What is he going to look like after an offseason in the weight program? How much better could he be next year? And then Jaquale and Roy start stepping up. And so now you're thinking this could be a really active front that can create a lot of pressure and havoc next year against offenses possibly. And then on the secondary, you start to see guys rise up. Derek Stingley started the year, a lot of drama, had an illness, was not able to play in week 1. Wasn't really attacked this year vertically down the field. Didn't have a lot of opportunities to make plays. Definitely not the All-American year of his freshman year. But now Eli Ricks is there, and you know what you have in Derek Stingley, and I think we all expect him to come back and be the star we know he is next year. So now you have possibly the best duo in the SEC or the country, probably the country. You have a really good defensive line. You've got 2 young quarterbacks that at times this year, they both played extremely well. Max Johnson played really well down the stretch. TJ Finley had some very good outings. South Carolina, he was very strong in that game, helped them win that game. So, I think there's a lot of positives moving forward. Keyshawn Butte setting records. So now you have an established number 1 receiver in the passing game. Coy Moore working in the slot. And these guys are guys that are going to be here for, a lot of these guys are going to be here for more than just next year. And so when you really start looking ahead, the future looks pretty bright. Do I expect them to be back in a national championship next year? I don't know if I can personally handle that after this year. Like, I don't know if we can go back up that and back down this roller coaster. But, no, I don't think that's going to happen next year. But I think they're going to be really good, really competitive. And I think going into that following season, I could easily see them in that position once again.
Right. Something you mentioned about us as media, our expectations going in, I also think it was a little bit of a challenge from the whole COVID perspective. I mean, we did not see a practice in person all year. We only got limited amounts of clips, which LSU sent to us, and what we were hearing had to come from sources. And so it was really a bit of a challenge. We kind of didn't really know what to expect going into week 1. And, was week 1 a fluke? Okay. And then they came back so from our side of things, it was a very challenging and weird year to try to cover this team as well.
It absolutely was. And really, I think I expected a lot of teams in college football to experience issues with installment of playbooks and things of that nature, right, with the limited practices. Let's remember, when the fall practice started, after not having spring, when the fall practice started, LSU got hit really hard. One of the first big stories to pop out about any of the teams getting hit with COVID and kids having to be quarantined came out of Baton Rouge. And so now you have a new system you really couldn't install in the spring, no practice, you've got a young team, and a lot of your starters are out. And then as soon as those guys come back, other guys start dropping off, and they're in quarantine for 10 to 14 days, depending on their circumstances. So, there's a lot that really happened to this team. And I really think if you were to play all that out through the spring, this season would have looked quite different for LSU. It would have been a lot better of a football team. And the results would have showed on the scoreboard. And so, just a rough season, man. Really rough year for everyone.
I agree. And, that's without, that's just COVID, and that's just the massive loss of players they lost at the draft last year. That's without, the opt-outs, the transfers, and installing a new system, new coordinators, there's a lot of off the field things that were also happening. So it's just, that's a lot to throw at a team, a very young team, I should mention. And I agree with you. I think we'll see a much much more competitive LSU group next year. I mean, I'm not ready to put out a prediction or anything like that, but I do agree. I think they'll be much more competitive in 2021. And I think that's going to do it, though. Is there anything else you want to add before we go? I mean, is there anything you want to mention while we're recapping this year for LSU?
Yeah, I think just everyone, thanks for sticking with us through this crazy year. Thanks for hopping on our channel, listening to this podcast. We look forward to kind of engaging with you more. Looking forward to wish best health to all of you. Happy New Year to everyone. And hope to see you soon and speak to you soon.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have a couple more podcasts coming out in the coming days. We're going to do one about the coaching search and the changes, and then we're going to try to break down this 2021 class and see how LSU is going to wrap it up. But that's going to do it for this edition of In the Details. And be sure, if you haven't already, be sure to sign up for TigerDetails.com and stay tuned for all the latest LSU news, coaching searches, and recruiting tidbits. I'm Julie Boudwin. He's James Smith. Thanks for listening, and bring on 2021, right? Happy New Year.
Absolutely.